This week, crypto crashed in an absolutely historic way. And that means one thing and one thing only. I was wrong. I was completely wrong that Q1 would repeat the historical fractals of having Bitcoin and crypto blast off to entirely new highs. And believe me, my wallet is feeling the pain. And that's because I've done exactly what I told you here on this channel and on my Twitter. I do exactly what I say. My portfolio is hurting. But the real question is, what do we do next? Is it time to cut and run from crypto, or is this yet another lull in a massive cycle? The biggest and most important cycle that crypto has ever experienced, in the beginning of our long anticipated golden age. I'm going to be answering that question for you, as well as giving you my immediate next steps on how I am preparing for this next phase of crypto. Because with Bitcoin down here in no man's land, it really begs the question, how far down could Bitcoin go? And will this completely destroy the altcoins? Now, first off, let's get this straight. We're going to be examining my thesis that I've used over the past 3 years, 2.5 years or so, to build incredible growth since the lows in 2023, but also being real about where I got it wrong and how we can iterate and make sure that we get things more right in the next phase of the market. Because to be clear, I do not believe this game is over. Of course, you know that I don't believe this game is over. There's no way that I'm going to be giving up my shot at not only eternal glory, but of course, generational wealth. We know the deal. We've been gambling for our future the entire time, and I am not stepping away from the table just because of a minor setback, no matter how major that minor setback might feel. Of course, we've been talking about how to spot the cycle top since the beginning of the cycle. And look at this. Actually, I didn't know this, but CoinGlass has an entire bull market peak indicators, how to sell at the top indicator. And they say that it is a 100% hold currently. They have over 30 indicators, or 30 indicators exactly, right? You have the pi cycle top, the Puel multiple, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And would it surprise you to know, not a single one of these indicators has fired. Not a single Bitcoin top indicator has actually been spotted in the wild. So we're going to go through and try to understand what this is, and if Bitcoin is adhering to a cycle at all, or if this is something entirely different. And if it is something entirely different, I believe it is something very good. I'm going to explain to you why I think we're in one of two buckets, which is we're either in a traditional pullback, a cleansing before we go higher, or we're in something new. And that something new would be inherently long-term, much more bullish than this 4-year boom bust cycle. So strap in, we've got a lot of ground to cover. First and foremost, while Bitcoin made this entire push downwards here, we can switch to the daily. We can see that as Bitcoin made this entire push down here, what we've seen here during this push is that Bitcoin dominance actually fell dramatically here. It fell almost to over 2%. At one point, it was a little lower. And you can see it's failing really to push up here, and it kind of is dropping even more. Now, wouldn't it be the most painful and utterly disgusting of ironies if at the bottom of this move, as altcoins felt like they had stage 4 terminal cancer, and the only thing you could do is get rid of them, hemorrhage them faster than you could say the words FTX. Guess what? Boom. You get altcoins starting to move without Bitcoin. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to say the holy and unspeakable words of alt season. But what we're seeing here is that essentially altcoins front ran this move. Most altcoins fell off a cliff, and then Bitcoin goes and has one of its worst days it's had not only this year, but in its history, right? Falling almost $10,000 in a day, and altcoins barely moved. In fact, a bunch of my altcoins were flat or green on the day. That's right. And this is as we see readings on the Crypto Fear and Greed Index. You can see here of a 10. A 10 reading. We haven't seen a 10 reading since June of 2022. That was when Luna and Celsius blew up. That was literally one of the worst periods ever in the history of crypto. And then we got FTX right after that. But really, FTX's low, if you look at November, it only hit a 23. This is lower than the FTX low, which is why I think the timeline looks and feels the way it does. For context, here is the regression band. Shout out to Aporia who put this up. Again, this is the regression band here showing that essentially Bitcoin is at the low end of this regression band. It can go a little under it. It did in the September-November region of 2023. And then again, it did in the July to sort of November region of 2024. You can see it can actually hang out down here for a bit. But in the end, what I'm saying is we're reaching into historically, this cycle, what has been extreme deep value. So the question is this deep value? And at this point, it's a good idea to come back to the crypto gamble and understand what we're doing here, because we've talked about this on almost every single episode. And when I talk about altcoins, I always urge you to go watch my fundamental videos about the key warnings and disclaimers about crypto here, which is fundamentally we are risking and gambling so that we can break free of a system that's kind of screwed over normal people. We just cannot set you up for life. They can set you up to not go hungry, but if you want to get ahead, you have to take risks. The S&P 500 doesn't give you that. A lot of people say, oh, just put it into an index fund. The S&P 500 on average has mostly matched inflation for the last like 40 years. So you cannot actually get ahead by just buying into the index funds. No matter how well they do, you're just keeping track with the debasement of the dollar. The only way that we've had in our generation to get ahead is crypto. And that crypto gamble is a gamble. For every dollar you risk, it could go to zero. But if you're right on some of these coins, it could go up 5x, 10x, sometimes 100x. And that's the gamble. There's no guarantees, but there is a chance that we could do better in life. And that's why we're here. That's why I'm here. And if I didn't think crypto had that potential, I wouldn't be doing this. But on the downside, sometimes you end up with periods where not only you doubt yourself, you feel like you're going crazy, but on paper, you've lost a lot of money. I know for me, the last 3 months, I've seen my net worth fluctuate more than I think I've ever seen in my life. Like, not even a question. But so long as you do believe that crypto goes on from here, the question is, how are you not bidding here? This is from Jason Yanowitz. He says, do you genuinely believe the cycle is over? Do you think Trump won't do everything in his power to pump the market? Do you think pro-crypto regulations that we've waited several years for will have zero impact? Do you think that you sound smart pontificating about macro being bearish? Do you see every major financial institution and fintech launching crypto products? Do you not believe? First of all, let's give him some snappy snapperoos for an absolute banger tweet. More to the point, do you not believe that there is a future here for crypto? Now, I'm not saying crypto reverses from this immediately. In fact, this looks like it'll take some time to heal. Of course, it does look and it does feel like there will be some major bounces here. I'm sure that there could be some bounces very easily back up towards this $90,000 level. But make no mistake, this $90,000 level needs to be flipped into support for this to become bullish. And until we see that, we can assume that maybe we'll go and explore this area for a while. I don't know how long. Maybe it'll be a couple of months. Maybe it'll be a couple of weeks. Maybe it'll be for the better part of the year. I don't know. And that brings us back to the issues with my thesis. And this is going to be where I roast myself, because while I've gotten some things really right, my thesis has been fairly inflexible. I bought key narratives at the bottom and I had one direction only, just hold until the beginning, sort of middle chunk of 2025, where we start offloading. And one of the key issues with this thesis is that it has a very specific, very low time preference for when the magic of crypto can happen. And what we've seen with crypto is that if you have a very specific time preference on when crypto needs to happen, that's when you can get absolutely eviscerated by putting your own expectations on a market that will behave as it behaves. And in the end, that's one thing that I need to stop doing, which is putting a very specific, very narrow time preference on how the market will behave. And so the thesis I have needs to be much more flexible with regards to time preference. And this is one of the oldest tenets of crypto investing, is that the investors with very low time preference do the best. So I need to return to that in my thesis. But the second thing is we need to analyze whether or not Bitcoin is truly still in a 4-year cycle and is resembling this traditional cycle and is going to have this traditional ending to the cycle. So come along with me on this journey. If we look here at the last sort of 3 years or so of the market, what we'll see is that there were a few major moments in which the market more or less got saved and more or less exploded up with new excitement and vigor. And they're pretty easy to see right here on the weekly chart. All you need to do is take a look at them for yourself. And what you'll find out is that each one of these actually corresponded to a single external stimulus that was not really native to crypto, but sent crypto spiraling upwards with excitement and new energy. First of all, you had the bank bailouts of the Bank Term Funding Program. This happened in early March of 2023, and it's why I flipped bullish, where they sort of stealth printed trillions of dollars for the banks to bail out the banks. Then you had the ETF application. Now we have one of the biggest financial players in the world saying, oh, there can be a Bitcoin ETF. There's now hope that we'll get a Bitcoin ETF, the ever elusive white buffalo. Then we get the ETF approval, right? And what's very interesting here is, if you'll see here, at each one of these phases, the market was starting to really look kind of bearish, right? It was starting to go down and starting to want to break down from these ranges into lower ranges. But then it gets kind of saved with this upward trajectory of each one of these specific impulses. And we see it again here on the approval. And then we see the sort of anticipation up to the ETF approval, a little bit of a sell the news, and then the actual flows come in, and they are monstrous. So once again, we get actual ETF buying, right? And so these are things that are really nice. Obviously, the ETF is a long-term sort of passive flow that continues. But each one of these moments was an individual external stimulus to crypto that sent Bitcoin up and made it look just kind of like it did over the last cycles. And of course, the biggest savior of all was the expectation of the first crypto president, which we actually got confirmation of here. This was when the bullet happened and it nicked Trump's ear. And that's when people said, you know what, this is happening. He won the election and we're going to have pro-crypto presidency. So everything from here was excitement about Trump. Again, all single-time, single-use external stimuli that all kind of ran their course, right? And then you get reality setting in and saying, okay, well, where is the next pump coming from? So the question is, by having a singular mindset that said, this is all a 4-year cycle, it's the same as the past, it's just going to pattern match, without realizing that these are all individual stimuli that are maybe not connected in any way to the cycle itself. But the question is this something new? Are we in a new type of market where Bitcoin kind of just responds to external stimuli and, most importantly, liquidity? One support for that is this chart here that Raoul Pal put up. And you can see he put this up in November and it showed a perfect top out right around 110K. And then the market coming all the way down and retracing most of its pump into February. So has Bitcoin just become a macro asset that's just more or less parroting global liquidity, and the ETFs allowed it to completely synchronize with global liquidity very easily? Well, there's a huge possibility that that's the case. And that would mean that my thesis of just everything being on a cycle is at the current needs at least some updating. And by the way, all of this means that the cycle is not just going to poof, dissolve into the wind like it has in the past. No, I really do believe that those days of eviscerating multi-year bear markets are probably behind us, or at least we have a significant amount of time before they reappear on one condition, and that is that we don't get some kind of macro doomer recession. If we get some massive recession, throw all that out the window. Because for now, with crypto fear and greed at 10, this is how Bitcoin looks on the regression band, and institutions truly being excited to be building here long-term for the first time ever, it really does feel like we're on the precipice of a golden age. But meanwhile, we do have some dark clouds in the sky. This is the only thing that troubles me, and the only reason for what I'm going to tell you today, which is we're starting to see some Doge layoffs in the data. We're starting to see actually unemployment claims here, 242K, where it was estimated at 221 prior to 219. So you see a nice little jump here in unemployment data. Now, while I am absolutely allergic to this macro doomer stuff, the reality is that there are dark clouds here. First of all, we have some fiscal austerity, which, as much as it's fun to cheer on all these budget cuts at Doge, they do create austerity. They're trying to slash the budget, slash spending, which is typically not what markets like to see. We're also starting to see US tech breaking down, with the US 100 index and QQQ showing signs of weakness. Of course, these things can have a head fake, but again, this is not exactly what you want to see. These aren't great pieces of data on the chart. And with the Fed being inflexible, with Trump starting saying he'd lower the 10-year, he'd weaken the dollar, and now Bessent kind of retracting on that, and Trump even saying that there might be some pain, there could be a case that all markets, not just crypto, are actually not getting the Trump pump treatment, but that we might be in a bit of a recalibration phase. Whether or not this ends up resolving just like every other scare, again, is unknown. That's why my plan here that I'm giving you at the end of this video on raising cash is super critical. Once again, my goal with this video is about how I plan to accumulate the most crypto assets during this dip, not how I plan to retreat entirely from this market. So I just want to be very clear. My goal is to maximize my crypto exposure, and I held on to throughout this entire time an absolutely astounding amount of assets, and I still continue to hold an astounding amount of these assets. So just know, even though I got out of memes and Solana and some other positions, so I happen to have some cash on hand, it's nothing compared to what I'm holding in the markets. The biggest fear, and you got to give Ansem some credit because he did call to de-risk at 110K. He said crypto is being de-risked first because it's the riskiest asset class, and that people are de-risking into cash and bonds across the board because they're forward-looking, and expectations are that Trump's tariffs and decrease in government spending with no accommodative Fed will hurt markets. And when looking at NASDAQ, you start to see a very similar picture to what you saw at Bitcoin, which is just complete de-risking and breaking of weekly lows. Again, we're going to be following this closely, but this could mean that markets in general are just scared of what Trump is doing and the lack of support from the Fed, and then cutting of spending, all of which should pressure markets, despite the insane onslaught of positive news. That is the only thing that I see really stopping this from being a full-blown bull run, is if effectively effectively the entire markets are just scared. But of course, if there is a pivot in policy from Trump, or if the Fed realizes that the pain has gotten too bad, that's when we will get an up-only crazy bull market. Obviously, Arthur Hayes now, he's predicting a retrace down to 70K. I don't know if we get that. I think that might be quite bearish. But in the end, this is what the dialogue has been like on crypto Twitter. And even though this is really exciting to hear that, who knows, probably there won't be an IRS by the time that we have to pay taxes next year. But the reality is that this does impact the overall picture of how solvent and how much revenue America is bringing in. So will this hurt economic outputs at first? Will this give less strength to the economy? Will this potentially hurt the stock market? Ben Cowan, who's been right all too many times of late, has put out this chart where he said, hey, look, here's where Reagan took office. And you had this kind of massive collapse of markets for 1 year and then a multi-decade expansion. So are we at the beginning of a Reagan-esque administration where everything's being moved around the table? We'll see a little bit of pain and then a long term of prosperity. So here we go. Here's the point. I've seen way too many people call for a macro doom or recession over the last few years. No one's been right. I don't think anyone has the ability to truly predict this stuff. But Trump is moving fast and he's doing a lot of things that are putting a fairly gentle situation and pushing it to its brink. So the question is, will we get a recession? I don't know. But I can tell you that if we don't, I believe that this is just a lull and we're about to rocket back up at some point in the not too distant future and see a much more significant rotation and season for our altcoin bags. And if we are tracking global liquidity, well, the global liquidity has ticked up massively since this chart has been expanded. As you can see, it just came all the way down into February, March, but after this period, it expands dramatically upward, reaching almost the highs we were at by the beginning of Q2. So is this March of 2017 where we had this massive drop? As you can see, the yellow trend line of MVRV Z-score is still up and to the right. It just came down and kind of touched that trend line that we've been on since the bottom. So are we just at a big drop, a scary drop, and going to pick right back up? Well, the answer is I can't tell you for sure which one it's going to be, but I can tell you what I'm going to be doing. Now pause for a second, because if you are in crypto and you are not using a VPN, then you are literally risking your life. No, I'm just kidding. You're not risking your life, but it is an absolute unnecessary risk to be browsing crypto sites, to be interacting with the crypto world, whether it's centralized sites like CoinMarketCap or a DeFi farm or a project website. You're effectively putting yourself and your identity on these websites for everyone to see. You should be blocking your identity with a VPN. It also has cool benefits. You can watch content overseas, whatever you want to do. But the most important thing is safety in the crypto world. You should always be using a VPN for your own safety, and you can get one for just a couple of dollars a month. Better yet, you can get an extremely juicy discount by using the link below. It supports the channel and I appreciate it. I need to be able to afford to pay my team here, so I appreciate you guys supporting the NordVPN link. As always, they're an awesome sponsor, an awesome product, and we thank them for sponsoring this episode. Now back to the good stuff. So first and foremost, on Twitter, I highly encourage you to follow me there, because oftentimes when the market's moving all crazy, I don't have time to do a whole video. I'll just tweet something. So what I tweeted is, all right, guys, the market wants us dead. Clearly, this is as things were getting really bad. Bitcoin was trading about 92K here. I said, you win, I surrender. I'm going to raise a bit of cash just in case we drop, meaning I sold off some of my positions, not a lot, nothing that are these key altcoin bags that I've been talking about, mostly just core stuff. Like I had already sold my Solana because I was very angry about the meme coin fraud apocalypse happening there, and it just made me bearish on Sol. I had also rotated out of Immutable X a few weeks before that, and I had bought some Berachain, but not all my Berachain. So I was just sitting on a bit of cash anyway. So I essentially just took the things out that were big and liquid, not in these core altcoin bags that have been beaten and abused like crazy. I trimmed just some small positions just as a way to say, okay, you know what? I've been wrong for the last 3 months. So maybe if I give up and I surrender here, maybe I can bottom the market and make it go up, because I can just extend this horrible trading streak. But the reality is that's not what happened. It did drop, and we now need to see the market recover a bit. And I do believe that we will see some rallies up and at least attempts to get back into this area here. So that is where I believe if you do see the market go up and touch that 90K prior resistance, I do think that that is an area where if you're looking to raise some cash, you don't have any cash, that'll be one area where you could. If you believe that this market's just going to keep rocketing up, then just hold your bags. And if you're not tripping right now, then just hold your bags. And this market is moving so fast that every time I film a video, I need to do a quick little update here. There's now like the third or fourth update. And you can see Bitcoin did take a tumble here and now is all the way back up here. Like I said, anything in the 70s, I feel like there's going to be just massive value down here. And as you can see here, Raoul Pal actually put out an update of this global liquidity, and you can see Bitcoin really hung out for a bit, diverging from the global liquidity chart, and then has completely reconnected here. And so maybe a little sweep lower, But then, of course, we see that global liquidity wants to pull Bitcoin back up very, very soon. You can see a lot of altcoins are back up to, where they were over the last few days. You can see Barachain here doing very well. Several of the top 100 alts actually green on the day. So you can see there is some altcoin seller exhaustion. And once again, I just think that we are going to start entering into value zones for at least a very significant bounce. I don't think this is where you sell. I think at least short term, you're going to be looking at a reversal from here. And again, so long as we don't get a big, nasty recession, which of course there's not great data, but there's not immediate recession fear data, this chart looks like it wants to pull Bitcoin back up with more liquidity in the world. The fundamentals are getting better, and we've finally seen the full death of pump fund with zero tokens bonding, meaning that there's none of these pump fund coins are making it out of the trenches. There's just no more actual runners. This is a hugely, massively healthy thing for the market, and we're excited to see this trend hopefully continue, though I do think the reality is that memes and trenches will return with more risk on climate. It's just the most likely reality, though I do think this is a great trend pivoting back towards quality. Hopefully that trend is what really continues. And so regardless of how bullish you are, I do think we'll spend some time probably exploring this range. I don't know which way we're going to go. Who knows? That's not really what matters, is predicting exactly how this happens. But I do think that it'll probably give you another shot at buying in this area. It was a big, significant breakdown to break down under this 90K level. It'll probably just take some time to repair. I doubt it just V reverses back up. I mean, clearly the charts are not V reversing yet. So the question is what to do. And my belief is that we are in deep value zones across the board. And in these deep value zones, you want to pursue stacking up on the highest conviction bets, the finest and most high quality assets in the space. And so what are those? Well, one of them is Hyperliquid. We've been talking about this, but it hit an all-time high of 16% of Binance's volumes. This is on-chain. This cannot be faked. We know that there's a lot of wishy-washy volume on these exchanges, but you had 1/7 of Binance's volume happening on a single blockchain dedicated to effectively being a decentralized version of Binance, right? So you have this decentralized version of Binance really starting to catch. And so what's happening in Hyperliquid is a story that I believe is still in its infancy. You can see here, Hyperliquid is not even in the top 20. And despite all of the trouble, I mean, it is down from $33. You can see it's now under this prior resistance of about $22. We're already starting to see some decent value out of Hyperliquid. Like I said, under $20, probably good value long-term for something like Hyperliquid. And you know that this is one of the key, most important pieces of tech in the industry. And it's not plagued with the same casino narrative that Solana had. But speaking of which, everyone right now is freaking out over Solana, which apparently is going to have a new inflation rate of, instead of almost 7% dilution, it'll have a 0.8% dilution. So the new inflation, the new unlocks are going to be significantly less for Solana. And this is because they realize that after a certain level of staked Solana, there's no value in incentivizing more stakers, that it needs to essentially drop off a cliff because more stakers does not actually make the network more secure. It's minimal. And when we look at Solana, I mean, when I tweeted, look, I'm out of this, I'm sick of this, it was about $205 or something, and it's fallen almost $100. It fell down to 130. And what we'll see here is that you have a massive point of support here. As you can see, it bounced off of it in 2021. You can see it used it here as resistance. It finally broke through and went on this massive tear. And so, I think that this 120 area is pretty significant. And then again, below that is probably deep value. And if we look at Solana against Bitcoin, we can see that it's broken significantly down here, and that the next major area here is 0.001. But what we really want to know is Solana going to die? And to be honest, I'm not sure that it's going to die, but I do think it's going to go through a period of sort of collective mourning and grief, realizing that it was the vehicle that extracted and scammed and screwed over so many users, the actual narrative which drives value. Remember, it's not the actual tech. It's not the actual fees. It's the story we tell about those pieces of tech that drives crazy value. It's not Tesla making electric batteries. It's Elon Musk saving the world with his new technology. That's why Tesla went to $1 quadrillion. And essentially the narrative in the institutional circles around Solana has been own the casino. Do you want to own the casino? That's why people were buying Solana. That's why people were porting from ETH to Sol to actually gamble in the casino and make, legendary 100,000x gains, like with Dog with Hat and coins like that. But when that narrative unravels and all of a sudden the casino doesn't pay out and everyone who enters the casino essentially gets their arm cut off, well, the question is, Who wants to own a casino that's brutally mutilating its customers? No one. That's not the business we got into, and the narrative is unwinding. But that doesn't mean that there won't be value on SOL. And I do think that we could see a correction here where picking up some very cheap, very distressed SOL is a potential here. Again, I do think, though, that there's potential that it has topped against Bitcoin. This is something that Benjamin Cowan has pointed out, which is essentially that SOL BTC looks a lot like ETH BTC back in 2021. And if you look at this high, you could say, okay, this has kind of really struggled to get above this resistance level. That's almost exactly what ETH BTC looked like back in 2021. So if you see Solana, come under here and then make a move back up towards this line, this would probably be a good time to sell. Again, adapting my strategy here, I had a very simple strategy of I'm going to buy things and I'm just going to hold them blindly forever. And there was not really a sense of offense versus defense. And the reality is that if we're looking at a cycle that extends further, that is actually based on global liquidity, that is actually based on big new events happening, like if they find that there's no gold in Fort Knox, all of a sudden there'll be a panic and a drive into Bitcoin. All of these things will be single time events that we need to analyze and see, okay, what's the extent of that impact on the market and how long is this going to impact the coins? And most importantly, we will start establishing, are we going to be in offense mode or defense mode? Because as you know, we believed that after the inauguration, there would be a sell-off. We also believed that we would come and get bought up from the bottom of that sell-off and have an amazing, glorious alt season. But the smart move would have been to transfer from offense mode at the end of December, early January, to defense mode, and then stayed in defense mode until we once again saw confirmation that we needed to be more aggressive or that there was some big flush out like we're seeing right now. So that's going to be the adaptation that I make to my strategy, because I want so badly to crush this YouTube and trading strategy, and balancing this idea that I needed this simple, stupid strategy that could give people incredible gains and that it was going to be unchanging and unflinching for years on end. Balancing all of those things really has been hard in a market where there hasn't been tons of fresh new inflows of capital. The game is advanced. The traders that we're playing against are very advanced, and having a single stagnant strategy is something that will probably not only be almost impossible to keep up and to nail over time, but it needs to be iterated on. My goal is to keep getting better. The one thing I can say for sure is I do exactly what I say here on the show, and I stick to my word. And so if your portfolios are in pain, just know mine's in pain too. I'm right there with you. But I do believe that we have some pretty exciting times ahead, and I'm going to be using this particular dip, this particular washout, waiting for a bounce. And if you guys need to raise some cash, I would wait for the market to bounce up towards that 90K and understand that it's probably going to take a few attempts to recover above there. So I would expect that if Bitcoin runs up to 90K, that would be a decent region to raise some cash, not because you want to get out of the market entirely, but because you want to buy lower. Like me, I want to buy lower. I want to get even more coins. I want to switch from defense to offense at the right times, and I want to maximize my exposure to this run, which I believe is still going to be entering into a golden era, that we're seeing for the first time ever decentralized versions of massive businesses like Binance that we can own a piece of through Hyperliquid. We're seeing our assets make it to the stock market, to ETFs. This is the hallowed land, the golden age. And as you know, I'm super passionate about gaming, about Superverse. We haven't had a gaming season yet, but there are little breakthroughs happening here that make me very confident that what I'm passionate about crypto and gaming being the ultimate fusion, that is where we're headed, and we are very early. I'm extremely bullish. And in fact, Superverse is going to be shipping some really amazing stuff soon. There's no point in waiting around for perfect market conditions. Just so you know how bullish we are, the project is moving at a breakneck speed and pushing full steam to keep shipping product out, because once this market flips fully back on and everyone realizes that things are still going well, we want to own the biggest amount of that pie. Again, over 4 years in, I've never sold a token from Super. We stay absolutely riding with the community. And so if there's any sign of my dedication to this market, that should be it for you. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Yes, I was wrong. I should have switched to defense mode, but the game is not over. This market is not done. And if we don't get some kind of crushing recession, I believe that the odds at the crypto casino have shifted in favor of better risk reward. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to click on this one popping up right now.